There was still another 5 minutes before the 10:15 arrived, so it was a bit of a shock when Curly and Tubbs heard the familiar sound of a train whistle. The boys ran to the other side of the bridge. Here the line quickly disappeared as it curved away past some houses and into a cutting, but they could see the smoke of the approaching train above the rooftops. "Mr. Stevenson, the train's coming!" shouted Curly. Mr. Stevenson put down his watering can and took out his pocket watch from his waistcoat pocket. "No, it's too early yet. Another 5 minutes. But we could see the smoke. Didn't you hear the whistle?" "No, I heard no whistle," replied Mr. Stevenson and returned to his watering. Curly rejoined his brother on the other side of the footbridge. They watched the progress of the train by the smoke, eagerly awaiting the first sighting as it came round the bend. It reached the last building before the line came into view and then, finally, emerged. But it was not the train Curly and Tubbs were expecting. "Wow! Look at that!" cried Tubbs. The engine was not the Greyhound or the Standard Arthur. This one was bright red, shiny, and new, as if this was the first time it had ever been used. Then, behind the engine, instead of the passenger carriages, there were 3 goods wagons. These were a bright color too, but this time green. They were empty and, like the engine, appeared to be brand new. Finally, there was the guards van, a glorious yellow guards van, as clean and fresh as the rest of the train. "I've never seen a train," Curly began to say, but stopped. There was something familiar about this train. "It's your train!" shouted Tubbs. Of course. That was why it was familiar. Curly had a toy train at home that looked exactly like this one, a red engine, 3 green wagons, and a yellow guards van. It was, indeed, Curly's train, but this one was full size. The engine had almost reached the footbridge. Usually, the driver would be leaning out of his cab as the train approached the station and would wave to anybody on the bridge. There was no driver to be seen on this train, and although he could not be sure, Curly thought that there was nobody at all in the cab. Then the front of the train was under the bridge, and the boys were engulfed in smoke. They hurried to the other side, waiting for the smoke to clear, anxious to see the strange train again. By the time it had cleared sufficiently, the yellow guards van was passing underneath, and just as with the engine, there was no sign of anybody on board. Curly and Tubbs had been mesmerized by the train and had not taken their eyes from it since the smoke had cleared. It was not until it began to slow down that its hypnotic hold was broken and they looked away. The sight that greeted them was even more astonishing than the train. The landscape had changed completely. The station had disappeared. In fact, the whole of Oakstead had disappeared. Instead, there was a large expanse of open grassland, bordered to the right by a wood. The grassland was dotted with clumps of trees and bushes, and a small river snaked its way down from the line of rolling hills that marked the horizon. The railway line ran in a straight line across the grassland, between the river and the wood, finally disappearing into the hills. From the other side of the footbridge, both the open land and the wood stretched all the way as far as the eye could see, the grassland neatly cut in half by the railway line, which kept a perfectly straight course. "Where are we?" asked Tubbs. "What's happened to all the houses?" He was frightened and close to tears. "I don't know," replied Curly. He too was shocked by what had happened, but strangely enough, he did not feel afraid. There was that same familiarity that he had felt when he saw the strange train for the first time, but he did not know why. The view from the footbridge was beautiful, the land was bathed in sunshine, and the temperature was pleasantly warm. The air was teeming with wildlife. Birds were in the air, in the trees and bushes, and on the river, their songs and calls competing in a riot of noise. Animals as well. Everywhere the boys looked, they spotted one familiar creature or another. Even insects. Dozens of them were to be seen, flying, crawling, creeping, scuttling, buzzing, so many and so many varieties. In fact, Curly and Tubbs had never seen so many different species in one place at the same time. It looked as if every creature that they might expect to see whilst out on a nature walk had all shown up at once. Then suddenly, the penny dropped. "Oh, crikey!" exclaimed Curly. What?" said Tubbs. He was standing as close as he could to his brother, still shocked by what had happened to them. "The encyclopedias! Nature! This is one of the pictures. You know, the one that has all the British species on it." Curly pointed at the landscape before them. "There should be a fox over—" A fox ran across the open ground and disappeared into a clump of bushes exactly where Curly pointed. "And a badger by that tree," said Tubbs. There was the badger, the black and white stripes on its head clear to see as it rooted about the base of the tree, searching for grubs, just as it was in the picture. The otter family by the river. The mother otter and her 3 cubs were swimming in and out of the reeds at the water's edge, whilst the dog otter stood on the bank, keeping watch for any danger. The heron, tall gray bird, was stood perfectly still in the river, the water halfway up its legs, waiting patiently for a fish to pass by. The weasel, the kestrel hovering, the woodpecker on the oak tree, the stag beetle. The boys were racing each other to remember the creatures in the picture and finding them right where they expected them to be. Then an even more astonishing thing happened. A small herd of roe deer that had been grazing near the river suddenly began to run towards the wood. They were heading straight for the train, but as they got closer, instead of slowing down, they kept on running. Curly and Tubbs gasped, expecting the deer to crash into the wagons, but instead, they passed straight through and carried on, finally disappearing into the trees. The boys looked back at the train, and there was a rabbit grazing on the grass with one wheel of the guard's van running right through it. Suddenly, Tubbs jumped as a robin appeared to burst out from his chest. He felt no pain, and the robin had obviously felt nothing either. It had simply flown through him as if it had not known he was there. "This is impossible," said Curly. "We're in the picture and we're not. Everything that's in the book we can see but can't touch, and all the things that aren't in the book are invisible to the animals." The boys stood on the footbridge, looking out at the scene that they were so familiar with, trying to make sense of what had happened. The gentle chuffing of the idling steam engine was a persistent sound that eventually grabbed their attention. "I wonder why the train stopped," asked Tubbs. "Perhaps it's waiting for us," suggested Curly. "You gotta be kidding! I'm not going down there." "I don't think there's anything to worry about, and besides, I don't think we've got much choice." "What do you mean, nothing to worry about? If we step off the bridge and there's no ground, we could fall into a bottomless pit." "The ground is there, it's got to be. Otherwise, why hasn't the train fallen into your bottomless pit?" Tubbs was not convinced. "I'm still not going down there." "Okay," said Curly, "I'll show you." He ran down to the bottom step and, holding tight to the railing, carefully put one foot on the ground. It was solid, just as he had said it would be, and so, still holding the railing, he took his other foot off the last step. Confident now that he was not going to fall into Tubbs's bottomless pit, he let go of the railing and took a few steps away. "See? Nothing to worry about!" he shouted up to Tubbs. Curly was definitely standing on solid ground, but strangely, the grass was poking up through his feet. He walked over to a bush and reached out with his hand, which passed straight through the branches as if they were not there. "This is weird," said Curly. "I wonder if I can walk through that tree." He pointed to an oak tree a few meters away. He walked straight up to the tree, passing through the trunk and out the other side. "Wow!" he exclaimed. "This is fun! Come down here, Tubbs, and have a go!" But Tubbs was not happy. Watching his brother walk through trees was just too weird, and he still did not want to leave the footbridge. Curly ran back up the steps to join his brother. "Look, it's quite safe. You can't stay up here. You've got to come down to get on the train." "Why do we have to get on the train?" "I've been thinking about what has happened. We came here through the smoke, and I think that's the only way we'll get back. That means the train has to pass back under the bridge, and I don't think it's going to do that until it's taken us to wherever we're supposed to go." "But what if we're not back by 12:30? We'll be in trouble from Mum." Curly shrugged. "We'll just have to hope we are." Tubbs did not like it, but what Curly said made sense. He was still not happy about leaving the bridge, but he would rather stay with his brother than be left alone. "Okay," he said, "let's go." He walked up to the top of the steps and turned round, expecting Curly to be right behind him. What he had not expected to see was Curly climbing up onto the parapet. "Curly, what are you doing? You'll fall!" Tubbs watched in horror as his brother stood on the narrow ledge, held his arms out straight to each side, and launched himself from the bridge. He ran to the spot where Curly had jumped, certain that he would find him lying on the line below, but there was no sign of the other boy. "Curly, where are you?" he screamed, leaning out to see further under the bridge and almost falling when he felt a tap on his shoulder. "Hello," said Curly. What, how, where?" Tubbs was finding it difficult to talk. "Just practicing my sneaking up again," said Curly calmly. "But you jumped. How did you—" "I'm Flying Boy." "Flying Boy?" "Yeah, watch, I'll show you." Once more, Curly climbed onto the parapet, held his arms out like an aeroplane, and jumped. Tubbs watched him fall towards the ground, then level out and fly above the railway line towards the train. He then performed a perfect loop and twist, flew back along the line under the bridge and up with another twist to land next to his brother.